Good morning, everyone. My name is Roger Ffooks, and I'm extremely sorry that I've been unable to join you this morning. I've been working with SIGTO for very many years, and as I say, it's very sad that I can't be with you. I wish you the best for your meeting.
Okay, Roger. Well, thank you very much for allowing us to come down and interview you in this beautiful setting here in Dorset. As you know, it's 50 years of LNG shipping in October. It's quite difficult to believe, really. It's 50 years since we carried the first commercial cargo of LNG, and of course you were very much involved with those first two commercial ships. We'd like to ask you, going back to your sort of early days. You were a naval architect. How did you actually choose naval architecture?
Well, I was always rather keen on ships, and it was a pretty obvious direction for me to take, quite frankly. I started off boat building, but I was given the opportunity of going to university to study something, and so I chose naval architecture. And at Newcastle, what is now Newcastle University, and qualified in 1945. And at that time, Shell were looking for a naval architect to assist them with their contract for post-war shipbuilding replacement program, 50 tankers. And they went to Newcastle and said, have you got anybody that might be suitable? And they suggested me, and they thought I had an interview. They took me on, and that's where I started. They assumed I knew nothing about ships. Well, that's probably fairly true at that time. Theory is one thing, but practical is another. And so they shuffled me up to a shipyard, and I became assistant to their senior steel inspector. I spent a year there, and they asked me what I'd like to do next. So I said I'd like to go to sea to see what happens to the ships once they're built. And I served as a fifth engineer on a tanker, and then came ashore and started getting involved in the new buildings, and ended up in the research and development department. And at that point we were looking at special cargoes, not only crude oil but and petrol, but bitumen at plus 300 degrees, and we began to look at LNG at minus 165 degrees. That's when it became really interesting, and that's how I came involved in SIGTO and others.
Mm-hmm. And how did you first become involved with the Methane Princess, the Methane program?
Well, because I involved in the more obscure cargoes, I happened to be in a group that went to inspect the LNG technology being developed in the States at that time, which was the building or the design and building of the METHANE Pioneer. And it so developed that Shell were approached by the owners of that ship, and who wanted to get involved in an ocean-going project. So Shell sent out a team of inspectors, of which I was fortunately one. We went on board the Methane Pioneer and decided it was a technology worth buying into, and that's how I became involved. And then, of course, we set off on our own with the Methane Princess and so on. Long story, long time ago.
And could you tell us about how you decided on the actual containment systems which were used on the Princess? And
Well, yeah, the containment system that we favoured was what we call the conch system, which was developed directly from the Methane Pioneer. That's the trapezoidal aluminium tanks with a balsa insulation, and we used the satisfactory experience of that trial of that ship to develop the what's the size of the Methane Princess and Progress? They were how many? I can't remember how many. 27,000 cubic meters. Yes. And so that was the aluminium tanks. But of course, an awful lot of work had to go in to developing the heavier scantlings aluminium. Where the technology in the UK was just not known, and the balsa insulation, of course, was a very special technique. So there was a lot of work to do in developing that particular system.
And can you tell us about some of you mentioned the Methane Pioneer. Can you tell us about some of the individuals, some of the characters you came across in those days?
I didn't come across, well, the principal people that I personally came across in the Methane Pioneer days was Barry Thomas and Monty Bannister, and of course they were the naval architects that had been used. The American naval architects, J.J. Henry, had been used by the designers of the Methane Pioneer, and so we came into very close contact with them and worked very closely with them throughout the development of the Princess and Progress, and also for our future. We were looking also subsequently, much later, at we thought 135,000 cubic meter ships, which we thought were probably the biggest ships that were ever likely to be built in LNG, but that tends to be rather pessimistic. Yes, in the event.
And can you give us some of your memories and recollections of the construction of both the Princess and the Progress, both built in different shipyards, of course, in the UK?
Well, that's a long story, of course. In that it was mandatory that the ships should be built in the UK, and so we went to both Vickers in Barrow and Hull and Wharf in Belfast, who both undertook to take on one ship. Vickers was selected as the lead shipyard. And so most of the drawings were working drawings were produced by them. They were both built under dual classification, and of course the drawings, all the plans were, particularly what we call the special features. That's the cryogenic parts. All had to be approved both by ourselves, by Lloyd's, by ABS, and also by British Gas, who had a financial stake in the project, and really, you could say, initiated the whole thing from the very early days. And then once the building had started, it was a question of visiting the yards on a regular basis and make sure they're doing what they were told, and eventually, of course, the ships were produced more or less on time and more or less on budget, which was quite an achievement.
Yes, indeed.
As it so happened, the lead yard took a bit longer to develop their welding techniques for the aluminium tanks. And so they fell a bit behind in the progress and the methane, in the production. And the methane Progress, Belfast, was the first one to be built and completed trials. And that was, so there she arrived a little bit earlier. the Arzu liquefaction plant was producing LNG, so we used her for LPG. We fixed her up with a reliquefaction plant and used her for LPG for a couple of trips. And by that time, the Princess was finished, and unfortunately the plant wasn't quite ready. So we went down there with the Princess, although they told us that they were about to produce liquid. We arrived down there. This was in September, I suppose, '64. And there we were sitting waiting for liquid to come out of the pipes, which it took ages. And we had to. I had all these senior ABS Lloyd's surveyors and people waiting for the first loading, and it never came. So we all went home for a while and had a week's holiday. Came back. And by that time, liquid was available, and in fact, by that time, cooling down had just started. But as we'd rehearsed it all dozens of times, it went according to plan. So that was there we were now in Arzu, Algeria, with a ship and full of cargo, and ready to set off home. Mm-hmm. I was in charge of the whole operation of loading and of sailing back. As far as the voyage was concerned, we were due to end up at Canvey on a specific date when there was going to be a very important reception committee for us, MPs and all sorts. But we did. Well, the first thing that happened, by hanging around for so long in Algeria, the ship more or less ran out of fuel, so we had to dodge across to Gibraltar to refuel. Well, that was all right. But as we left Gibraltar, I was woken up at about 6 o'clock in the morning saying, Mr. Ffooks, we got a leak in one of the tanks. And, oh yes, I didn't believe it, of course. Because that was an impossibility, but nevertheless there was, and it ended up being a pinhole leak, which we never ever discovered. But there was always just that little bit of gas in the double in the space between the tanks and the inner hull. But the other problem was that we hit the Bay of Biscay at a very rough, at the end of a fairly substantial storm, and rolled heavily, which was good as far as I was concerned, because it tested out the keying system. So I was on deck with this ship rolling around, and looking at the key wave, which you could see how it worked because it projected through the tanks, projected through the hull, through the deck. But of course we were heading to avoid these very heavy rolls up to about 30 degrees, I think, the crockery falling all over the place. We were heading to New York instead of London to reduce the rolling, and that of course made us critical the timing for getting to the meeting at Canvey Island. But anyway, all went well. We turned round after a while and arrived on time in thick fog at Canvey Island.
Mm-hmm. And what about the vapour management on the maiden voyage? How did you get on with the natural boil off and the tank pressure?
Well, we were burning the boil off. And so there was none. That worked all right. The only slight problem was that one of that ship had an arrangement whereby you could jettison the cargo over the stern if there was a major problem and you had to get rid of your cargo. And somebody had forgotten to tighten the valve at the front of the accommodation. And so we found that the whole of the the jettison line through the accommodation back over the stern was full of liquid. So I spent the whole night with a hose pipe on this, trying to close this part open valve by hosing it with water. I got absolutely frozen with cold water. But we managed that, and it all disappeared. But that was about the only problem we had. But there were, in fact, slight cold spots on the inner hull, where there were what I would call minor imperfections of the joints of the panels, the insulation panels. They caused no particular problem, but they did persist throughout the life of the ship. You could inject foam and stop most of them, but they were just a bit of frost and nothing more. They didn't cause anybody any worry. It gave the ship officers something to do, to keep an eye on them.
Okay, Roger. Later, building upon the experience of the Princess Progress and the other ships that came along, IMO, or actually in those days IMCO, decided to write a code, and you were involved with that. So what are your recollections of the Bob Lakey and the committee that wrote the rules, the book?
Yes, well, that of course was a very interesting period. Bob Lakey, bless him, because he's no longer with us sadly, was a most diligent and positive and effective leader of that group. We had lots of discussions in various locations, all of which were memorable, and it was a great privilege to be part of it. I like to think I might have contributed something to it, but no, it was. It all went really very smoothly. We achieved what we had set out to achieve, and a lot of that, I think, its success is due to Bob Lakey's work. But we all worked very closely together, and of course, by that time, we were all good friends. Really, although there was a huge amount of competition between the various developers of different containment systems. We all knew each other well. We all got on together very well. We all collaborated, and no, it was a very, very satisfying period. I was privileged to represent the British Chamber of Shipping at those, and we had quite an amusing little experience with that because. Of course, I was representing British shipping, and of course, as each new regulation came on, I was rather inclined to say, "Oh dear, poor British ship owners, that's more expense." And in the end, we formed a club because at the meeting with this is going on too long, isn't it? But I can reminisce forever. This meeting was in Poland. And we were in a hotel, and this is soon after the release from Russian domination. And our hotel was rather primitive, and the beds consisted of three cushions, to each 2 feet square. And so I formed the British Triple Cushion Fund for the benefit of the poor British ship owners, and at the first meeting, I went round for donations, and I got a whole collection of small change of all different currencies from the. I put it in the book. I thought it was worth recording.
Certainly was.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. Next question,
please. Just as an aside, we've redone the Lakey committee work, the IGC code. We've redone it through IMO in the last 4 or 5 years, and fundamentally it hasn't changed. So I think that proves it. What was done was good.
It hasn't significantly changed.
No. there's
No,
some
I think we did.
clarifications.
I think we felt satisfied that we'd done a good job.
Because it's not just LNG; it had to cover LPG as well.
Oh, is it exactly? Yes,
And
it
that
does.
was. You remember the little yellow sinkers, as Bob used to call them, the little small ships.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's the company I went to work for.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
on the yellow sinkers.
Yeah, well, that of
Keeping
course.
them afloat.
I mean, there is a slight difference, problem with small ships and big ships,
Yes, indeed.
and LPG and LNG. But I think it's quite a job to mix it all up and get sense out of it.
Absolutely, yes. The other great innovation in the industry in those days was the development of some of the conferences like GasTech. And what are your recollections of those conference events and how they went on?
Well, there were several different conferences on the go. There was an LNG conference, which was just that produced some good work papers. But the best of all the various conferences were the GasTech conferences, initiated by a fellow called Brian Singleton, who edited one of the shipping papers, Shipping and Shipbuilding Record, and he initiated the conferences by having a meeting, a small meeting at a London hotel at the top of Park Lane. I can't remember the name of the hotel.
Cumberland.
And that developed subsequently into another bigger meeting, more international, in Monte Carlo, where all the designs on the market then were introduced and commented on, and then it subsequently became too big for him to handle on his own. It became GasTech, and GasTech was, I think, a vital component in the development of LNG shipping, because it enabled all the experience available to be, as it were, disseminated and discussed and evaluated. And I think GasTech still makes a very significant contribution to what has become touch wood, a very safe and satisfactory and amazingly rapidly expanding business.
And you must be proud that the award we still give at GasTech to technical innovation is the Ffooks
I was
Award.
amazed to get that. Yes, that was. Sometimes I find it difficult to find out who's won it, but
My apology.
But no, I'm amazed at that. GasTech gave me a little award myself, which was nice. That's a solid silver hallmarked model of a gas tanker, which sits on my revolving bookcase all the time. But no, the Ffooks Award, if people are proud to have it, then I just can't say how proud I am and privileged I am for it to exist. And I just say that it's something that surprised me that it was ever developed at all.
Roger, can I ask you about SIGTO, and when did you first become involved with the society?
I first became involved when it was initiated by, you reminded me,
El Paso,
which was the American group who planned a very big project which really never came off. But nevertheless, they saw the need for a group for the interchange of information, proper information, so which would hopefully ensure the safety and reliability of the business. And my first involvement was when I was interviewed to be the boss, along with one other, I think, Norwegian person, and a man from Shell called Maurice Holdsworth, whom I knew well, and he got the job. And I'm quite thankful, really, because I don't think I could have done it as well as he did. But that was my first involvement. And of course, to me, SIGTO is such an important group, does such fantastic work, that's why I'm so sad that I can't be with you today.
Okay. We've talked to you today about how the industry is with over 400 ships and these very large Qatar vessels, 260,000 cubic meters.
Yeah.
When you hear about after the 50 years of LNG shipping, what are your thoughts on the industry today?
What are my thoughts on the industry? I'm amazed, quite frankly. We always hoped that it would take off in quite a big way because we always felt that it was well worth it. It was, I mean, gas is a clean gas. It has there are massive reserves. It's difficult to, well, it's not so difficult once you know how to do it, how to handle it. But we always felt it had a future. Personally, I could see no reason why facilities, shoreside facilities being available, the ships couldn't increase in size considerably. We had, in my little group company, we had designs for a 165,000 cubic meter ship, which we thought was pretty big, but that has been exceeded already. I could never see any technical problem with increasing size. In fact, almost because they get bigger, they move around less, and the technical problems are possibly even reduced. But the increase in the past has always been the ability of the terminal to handle them. But now it seems that there are these huge ships available, about to be built, a huge number of new ships on the market, on order. It amazes me, and then the ancillary applications of burning of LPG fuel for ships. That, of course, there's no problem technically, but again, this is where SIGTO is going to have to come in to make sure that accidents don't happen, because if you, I mean, you can control and organise. How many members have we got now?
We've got about 190 members.
190 members, but that's going to be exceeded by about another 190 of all sorts of little people with, and I think there's a interesting job to be done on that safety front.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting, and but not surprising, because technically there's no problem really.
Well, Roger, we consider that you've directly contributed towards this safety record which the industry has over these 50 years. So certainly on behalf of a grateful society and a grateful industry, we'd certainly like to thank you for your contribution towards LNG shipping in those very early days. And little did you know that in 50 years' time we have this massive fleet and large numbers of ships, floating V-gas, floating V-liquefaction, Arctic LNG and everything else which is going on in today's world. But you've certainly directly contributed towards it, and also towards this very impressive safety record. So, we'd like to thank you on behalf of a grateful industry and a grateful society.
Well, you're very kind. I don't feel I deserve all that accolade, but I like to think I've spread the word a bit, and that my humble book has enabled one or two people to understand what went on in those early days.
Roger, congratulations,
Chris.
A lifetime of LNG.
Thank you, nearly. Yes, thank you so much. That's great.
Thank you for everything.
Well, my contribution has been very modest. Yours is almost more than mine, I think. Are you going to give him something as well?
When he retires.
Which I hope is another 80 years. But
8.
Eight.
Younger, so.
But you were my mentor.
You always said that, and I always feel very proud that you should have said that. I could never I seem to have done you a good turn, and I really appreciate, but quite unconsciously.
And that was what was so nice about it.
Mm-hmm.
Your generosity of spirit and you sharing.
Am I allowed to open this?
You can,
Of course.
Yes, please.
I think this is a box of chocolates, I think, probably. I wasn't expecting any of this, you realise that. I bet that's a reef knot under there.
You still know your knots. You still know your knots.
It's part of a containment system, Roger.
Look at that.
Isn't that beautiful?
Isn't that fantastic? That is amazing. Now, I have to put my specs on. Houston, London, Tokyo. Brilliant. Does that 35th anniversary and 60th panel meeting, Livorno, October 2014.
There you are, commemorative.
That is lovely. Thank you so much.
Perhaps should be.
Do those go automatically onto? How do you wind them up?
Not sure.
When all else fails,
Oh,
there's
some
the
instructions
instructions.
there.
Yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
You must be able to get at them
underneath
somehow.
everything.
Yes. Well, what it perhaps should have said was Houston, Tokyo, and Bridport.
Well, it's much the same, actually. I might have moved by then. Time setting. It says time setting. Oh, well, I'll work it out.
I'm sure.
But you can't. You have to take them out.
I think it's probably
Yeah.
take
You
them
take
out,
them
yes.
out. Yes, I see.
Yes. So I think you get the oxyacetylene gear out and sort of burn around it. So warm it up with a hose.
Okay, Roger, we got one further gift. So
Yeah.
Very, very nice to meet you. It's a
Well, it's great
pleasure
to
and
meet
a
you.
privilege.
And I hope you'll manage to withstand the strain of the job.
Absolutely, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Have you been with an oil company? Are you with a
BP, I was
Oh,
ex
you're
BP.
BP.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the oil company has always got to have the top chap, haven't they? I think it's sensible.
Yes.
But BP, and what were you in BP?
I was in 5.5 years in Indonesia as LNG shipping manager for the Tangguh project.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I was looking after the
Yeah.
one particular project.
Yeah. Oh, great.
After about 20 years at sea on LPG
Yes, I
carriers.
was ex-master as well.
Oh, you were?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, because it's not often ex-masters get jobs. It's usually the engineers that
Yeah,
get
that's
it.
true. That's very true. Yes.
You must be the
Yeah.
first ex-master.
Oh, no,
one of the
Bruce
first,
Keir and
Yeah.
James McCarty.
Oh, James McCarty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
James was.
Yeah.
But they were never on LPG. They were both tanker men.
Mm.
They were both BP.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, we had a boat down here till quite recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to sell it because really the problem of maintaining it
Mm.
out of the water
Yes.
in the winter
Mm-hmm.
I found began to get a bit tedious,
Mm-hmm.
so I sold it. But we had 25 years of boating here.
Very good. Yeah, that's
Good.
So
Anyway, it's great to meet you, and it's such a compliment for you to come down here and go to all that trouble.
Well, it is an honour and a privilege.
Oh,
It
no,
really
it's
is.
okay.
Yeah,
No,
and thank you very much for your time
It's the other
today.
way round. It's the other way round.